Steelers over the Browns last night. That last ball, any of you calling an illegal contact? Deshaun Watson.
Uncatchable.
Deshaun Watson's struggles continue. We'll talk about that. Also, Saints over the Panthers. A third of all 2-0 teams in the league are in the NFC South. What's that about? And Bryce Young's home debut. Yeah, the center's over there. Bryce, let's go around the horn. I've seen Hall of Fame quarterbacks do that before. John Elway's done that before. That's okay. But when you see it, you still gotta laugh, right? The latest on Nick Chubb. For the second straight week, a catastrophic season-ending injury on Monday night. We're not gonna show you the replay here. The turf grass debate, well, this one was on grass, but does that have anything to do with it either? It had just a pall over the game and a pall over the Browns' season once again. Well, when play resumed, though, it was Pittsburgh doing just enough in this mistake-filled bouillabaisse of a game. Fire Matt Canada chance cascading down in Pittsburgh to fire the offensive coordinator in week 2 here. But some of that on Pickett and his second straight off game as well. And also, another struggle for Deshaun Watson. Where should the Browns be with him right now? Last year, of course, there was rust, understandably, in his half a season. Through 2 games, 55% completions, and he's missing receivers 5 yards out of bounds on some huck and prayers. Turnovers were huge and hideous as well, and personal fouls. So I'll ask whether any of you are beginning to doubt where Deshaun Watson and the Browns are right now. But Courtney, let's start with your takeaway from Steelers over Cleveland.
I want to start with the team that won and Mike Tomlin's response to those fire Matt Canada chants that we heard loud and clear on the broadcast. He said today, "I appreciate their passion," referring to the fan base, which might lead you to believe that he too is not happy with the state of this offense right now. Let's start with Kenny Pickett. The interception on the first drive, not great. The reason that the Steelers were able to stay in this game and end up pulling out a win is because they had 2 incredible defensive plays from Alex Highsmith and from TJ Watt. But offensively, they looked like a mess. This doesn't look like the Kenny Pickett that we saw in the preseason. He's throwing behind receivers. He missed George Pickens on a slant route. It just doesn't look good. But where's the run game? This was supposed to be a big part of their offense. They had 55 total yards by the time this game ended, 1 rushing yard total in the first half. And by the end of the fourth quarter, I think they had -7 yards in that period alone. So a lot to work through here on defense, but fortunately, they have a great defense.
But a quick follow-up. The problems on offense, do you see that more as an offensive problem or a Kenny Pickett problem?
Right now, it's a Kenny Pickett problem because of some of these layups, these bunnies that he was missing yesterday. And that's not the guy that we saw in the preseason where interceptions were not an issue at that
Bill
point.
Plaschke, bring you in here. Takeaway, Steelers over Browns.
You know, I couldn't stop watching Deshaun Watson, and I couldn't stop covering my eyes when watching Deshaun Watson. He's a shell of himself. Who is this guy? In 8 games since he joined the Browns, he's accounted for 11 touchdowns and 9 turnovers. He's been awful, arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL during that time, judging by all the numbers. He looks lost out there. He looks confused. He looks slow. I don't understand all of the money they gave him. They had to be so worried about him. He had a chance to win the game yesterday, and he couldn't do it. He ended up with that uncatchable ball. That was not pass interference. That was an uncatchable ball, which is typical of how his game was. 2 turnovers led to 2 touchdowns for the Steelers. Deshaun Watson, where are you?
Okay. I was calling for illegal contact. That's what I said, at least in the tease of the show, because it may have been before the pass. But Kevin Blackistone on the takeaway from last night, is it about Cleveland or Pittsburgh to you?
No, I'll follow up on what Bill said. It's got to be Cleveland for me right now. You know, the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, he'll figure that thing out. He always does. But the Steelers invested so much in Deshaun Watson, and he is not himself anymore. I mean, since he's come back, his completion percentage is down, his TD percentage is down. He doesn't appear to be able to get away from pass rushers anymore, which is one of the things that made him so special. So what do you have left? No wonder he was so frustrated last night. 2 flags on him for grabbing a face mask. When have you ever seen that from a quarterback? And then the incident with the referee, not good. And now he doesn't have a running back. Nick Chubb, a guy who spoke out, was on that Zoom call this summer with the other running backs talking about contracts, a guy who the first NFL running back in history to go 5 straight years, first 5 straight years with a 5 yards per gain average. And now he's out, obviously, for the season. That franchise right now is broken, and there's no way to repair it.
And Harry Lyles Jr.
Well, first, you know, we talk about Steelers fans wanting to fire their offensive coordinator. I feel like we do that every year with this team. A team obviously filled with a lot of tradition, that being one of them. But I do think that they'll be okay because of how great that defense has played and the talent that's on it. TJ Watt is finally healthy, and we saw that last night. But the Browns are in a place where they cannot run and hide from this terrible Deshaun Watson contract anymore. In 8 games, he's got 11 combined touchdowns and 9 turnovers. And one of the things that gave the Browns any hope at all this year was the fact that you had Nick Chubb and the fact that you have a defense that a lot of people fear. And you just lost one of those things. So now you're in a place where there is no hiding from Deshaun Watson and the fact that he has not looked like the same player in almost 3 years now. So I don't know where the Browns go from that because he's got a no-trade clause. There's no easy way out from that. I think they would owe something like $100 million if they cut him. So you have to figure that out at some point, and I think we're going to get to a place where we saw all the hype for DTR, his backup, in the preseason. It's not going to be a long time before you start seeing people perhaps starting to call for him because of how poor Deshaun Watson
So I'm hearing
looked.
from 3 panelists here, 6 games last season and 2 games this season is not too early to say we may have made a huge $230 million mistake.
That's enough time. With training camp, that's enough time. He should be better than this.
The Nick Chubb injury, both brutal and for Chubb, of course, full pause, and for the team. But I want to get to what Blackistone was saying about the running back position. Courtney Cronin, your thoughts on that?
How ironic was the timing that the NFL filed a grievance against the Players Union yesterday about the what they were alleging that the Players Union told players, running backs, to feign injuries or exaggerate them to help with contract negotiations, and then Nick Chubb ends up going down with a very gruesome injury. He's the heart and soul of this team. With him out, they can look to some trade candidates, maybe Cam Akers ends up being the guy that they end up going after, but this has got to be on Deshaun Watson. You paid $230 million to bring in somebody who had a total QBR of 16.5 last night and was sacked 6 times. Some of which he caused by himself. He's got to be the one to pull this team out of this rut right now with Nick Chubb on the sideline for the year.
We've been Horn. We'll move on to last night's other game. The NFC South right now. Tampa 2-0, Atlanta 2-0, and New Orleans 2-0. Who had that? More 2-0s in division than the entire AFC right now. But the eye test, this Derek Carr pick that he threw into triple coverage, means it was 6-3 at the half. And the final was Saints 20, Panthers 17. Bill Plaschke, how good of a 2-0 are these Saints?
They are good. I love me some Derek Carr. I saw him, what a leader he was out here for Vegas. He had a terrible defense. Now he's got a great defense. They did not a lot of penalties. He completed 80% of his passes in the second half for 2 touchdowns.
Okay.
When the big moments come, Derek Carr steps up. This is really the kind of team he's always wanted, always needed. He has 4 completions of more than 40 yards. That's the most in football right now. Derek Carr and the Saints, I'm all in.
Kevin Blackistone, you're shaking your head no. You seem perplexed by Plaschke's argument there, please.
I mean, congratulations on being 2-0. They won a week ago by a point. They won last night over a rookie quarterback, 20-17. I like Derek Carr, too. I think he's been a punching bag unnecessarily. But you know what? Talk to me after they play Green Bay, after they really have to put up some points and see how stout the defense will be. I'm not sold on the Saints just yet.
Wait, so Green Bay's the barometer whether the Saints are for real? Very interesting. Harry Lyles Jr. on the 2-0 New Orleans Saints.
KB, I'm glad you mentioned the Packers because, you know, it's really funny. Another team that's 2-0 in the NFC South is the Atlanta Falcons, and they just beat those Green Bay Packers. And I tell you what, I think that they might be the best team in the NFC South. And Bijan Robinson also might already be the best running back in the NFL. I don't want to be dramatic, but I'm going to call it today.
Can we please talk about the team we saw last night, the New Orleans Saints? And I showed you the Derek Carr pick. And in fairness, that was his one for the game, Courtney Cronin. But that was a tough and ugly pick. How 2-0 are these 2-0 Saints?
their defense is keeping them in games, and that's the reason that Derek Carr can make mistakes like that and be able to rebound. This is the 10th straight game where New Orleans defense has held opponents under 20 points, and they got pressure with 4. They didn't have to blitz last night, which is great. When you have a division where you face quarterbacks who are young, like Bryce Young and Desmond Ridder twice in a season, you've got 7 you can commit to coverage. That's the caveat here where Dennis Allen's able to get very creative in the way that he attacks these passing offenses. So I think as far as, their strengths, it's obviously on the defensive side of the ball, but Derek Carr's going to end up working through things. He said during the game that he learned some things on the fly with his receivers about where they might want the ball placement, so hopefully for their sake they can carry that.
So am I learning here that this panel thinks the Saints are for real, or their defense is for real, and that they could build upon
defense.
that? Harry's got Atlanta in the division. I know that. You didn't even mention the team that played last night in our...
Saints win the division.
Let's ask a question about Bryce Young here, because it was his home debut. The numbers, in the end, were better than last week, but a lot of those numbers came on a last drive versus a prevent-y defense for New Orleans. Harry, anything jump at you with the number 1 pick, good or bad?
For me, a lot of it's good. You can still see his really natural and good game instinct. The thing that concerns me about them and him is the fact that he's been pressured on 33% of all of his dropbacks, which is the highest in the NFL. If you look towards a team like, I don't know, the Cincinnati Bengals, who also took a guy number 1 overall, and how they haven't necessarily protected him, and how that is turning out, that for me is my biggest concern with the Panthers and Bryce Young.
Horny, what jumped out you, Bryce Young?
You could hear on the broadcast when he was going up to the line of scrimmage yelling, kill, kill, kill. That's on play calling because he sees something clearly pre-snap that he has to adjust to. But that's a really good sign. Somebody like him who's young in the NFL can go and make those adjustments at the line of scrimmage, even if his team can't run the right
Bill
play.
Plaschke?
He looks like a good college quarterback who's lost in the NFL. He hasn't completed the pass of longer than 15 yards yet. They're not really testing him. They're rushing him. He seems lost.
Kevin Blackistone.
And that's why he's a rookie quarterback. We see this from time to time. Trevor Lawrence started out. He didn't look very good. You get a few games under your belt. We know this guy can play. He played the top level in high school, the top level in college. He'll figure it out.
There are jokes going around that he had better supporting players around him at that point in high school and at that point in college, which is a growing. Well, this is what happens. You get drafted number 1. Typically, you're going to a team that has a ways to go to compete. We'll take a break right here. Buy or sell on the other side.
Around the Horn. Welcome back to Around the Horn, coming to you from the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17.
The latest on Joe Burrow, his status for this week up in the air. Re-aggravating the calf last week. The team is 0-2 and they host the Rams Monday night. Bengals fans ready to dig underground in a hole. Can't think of the word for that. Bill, make the call. Play or rest Burrow.
Got to rest Burrow. I've seen the Rams defense. You don't want to put him out there against this swarming Rams defense. He's struggling. He's really not himself. 0 for 11 on downfield passes. Jamar Chase hadn't caught a touchdown pass. His 4.2 yards per attempt is the worst in the NFL in 20 years. After two games. He's just been hurt. You don't want to get him more hurt, especially against the Rams.
What if they fall 0-3, Bill?
Well, they have the Titans coming up next, and they have 2 in the Cardinals. They can get it back.
Courtney Cronin?
They've got Seattle after that, and then the bye week in Week 7. The best course of action here right now is to put him on IR, as tough as that is a pill to swallow. I thought Jamar Chase articulated it perfectly in the post-game locker room that he wishes they would have sat him from the start. Maybe they wouldn't be in this situation, but Joe Burrow he's a right-handed quarterback, so when he drops back to pass, he's launching off of that right foot. He's pushing off that right foot. So if that's going to affect the calf injury going forward, that could potentially worsen it to something worse than a calf injury. If it's an Achilles, they're going to be kicking themselves. Sit him right now, get him back after the bye, and then go forward in Week 8.
Oof. Harry Lyles Jr.
I don't even think it's a question. You've got to rest him. This is your investment. This young man has already taken you to a Super Bowl. He has had the Chiefs' number up to this point. You have to rest him because, again, he hasn't looked like himself, and that is the most alarming thing out of all of this. It is so hard to get just a decent quarterback in the NFL. You perhaps have one of the 3 to 5 best. You need to rest him, let him take his time. The schedule doesn't look that daunting moving forward. To Courtney's point, the bye will be coming up as well. Let him get his rest, let him get right so you can have a very bright future and not just a good season.
Kevin Blackistone.
Yeah, that yards per attempt that he has right now is incredible. I mean, that leads to the fact that they lead the league right now in 3 and outs in this league so far. You know, they paid him $275 million for 10 years to be there, not for 10 games.
All right, I understand everybody's ready. Does anyone know who the backup quarterback is for Cincinnati?
Jake Browning.
Yes,
Jake Browning.
It is Browning. Well, appreciate you guys at least mentioning the name. That was a change.
I watched my Rams film.
Yeah, you're watching your Rams film. I'm glad you brought up how daunting the Rams matchup is. You said they should tank the season 3 weeks ago. Now it's all like, oh, these Rams
They're going to the playoffs. They're going to the playoffs.
The Cincinnati team did start 0-2 last year, did win 10 straight. Whether you think they could win 10 straight, start a streak with Browning at quarterback, something different. But we'll move on. Buy or sell to Alabama QB shuffle. Nick Saban going back to Jalen Milroe as starter now for this week versus Ole Miss over Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson. Milroe benched in the win over South Florida last week, but that win was the losiest win we've seen the Tide and Saban have in some time in the slop. Harry, you weren't at that game for Alabama. You did cover the Texas-Alabama game week before that. Does Alabama have a QB problem? Has Saban botched it with all the shuffling?
It's definitely a tough situation, but I don't think Saban's botched it necessarily. He had Milroe in there because he is very clearly the most talented of all his quarterbacks. Because Texas did not go the way they wanted it to, they played Buckner. He's got the most game reps. And that, to me, is something that obviously has been the biggest detriment to Jalen Milroe, because as I've spoken to a Heisman winner here during the summer, Charlie Ward, he said, hey, the one thing that helped my own development was the fact that I did not have those game reps. Once I got those, I became the player I knew I could be. Jalen Milroe needs that. It just so happened that they played Texas in week 2.
Follow up, because Saban said this. He said that Milroe showed good leadership while taking the seat last week. How do you read that?
I think that helps. I think he wanted to see if he was going to be a mature player. That's something that Saban's always had in his program, guys that are going to root for the men around him, because that's sort of how they build each other up. It's a bunch of 4 and 5 stars making each other better.
Kevin Blackstone.
Well, they don't have a quarterback problem. They have a coaching problem through the first part of this season. That's not a move that Nick Saban ever should have made, and I would bet that at the end of the year he'll look back on that and regret that. Jalen Milroe, with that offensive line that can't block very well, is your best option under center, because at least he can get away. And it's not going to get any easier against Ole Miss, because guess what? Jay Golding, their defensive coordinator, where was he the last few years? On the Alabama staff.
Pete Golding, but yes, Pete Golding, but correct.
Pete
yes.
Golding.
Bill Plaschke.
I've never heard a coach say a quarterback was going to be a starter because he was a good cheerleader on the sidelines the game before. That's ridiculous. Milroe never should have been benched in the first place. They got an issue, and KB's right, it's a coaching problem. I think it goes to Tommy Rees. They have a new offensive coordinator. He wasn't really successful at Notre Dame as an offensive coordinator. I think he's trying to figure out these quarterbacks. They have 3, they have none.
Courtney Cronin.
A lot of people criticize Nick Saban for not attacking the transfer portal as much and for being so outspoken against it. Well, he did. He got Tyler Buckner. It just happened to be not so great of a pickup. All they needed to do was look at the game that they had against USF. They were 33-point favorites in that game, and they looked terrible with Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson. Jalen Milroe is the only answer here going forward, but every quarterback they have is going to struggle behind an offensive line that gave up 5 sacks against the South Florida defense.
Bill Plaschke, Harry Lyles Jr., thanks for your time today. Plaschke, I'm still calling you out on what you tried to do with the LA Rams. That was an incredible pivot you tried to make there. Courtney Cronin, Kevin Blackstone, Showdown next. Courtney Cronin, Kevin Blackstone, good luck in Showdown. Here's Brian Daboll with an update on Saquon Barkley.
I'm not saying that he's out yet. He's a quick healer. I'm not saying he's in, he's out. We're going to take it all the way up with him to Thursday.
A quick healer and a game-time decision for a short-week game. Do you believe Daboll there, Courtney, or is it strategy?
All I believe is that this is a low ankle sprain versus a high ankle sprain. Brian Daboll looked like a hostage there delivering that news. They play on Thursday. Saquon Barkley will not be playing.
Kevin Blackstone.
If my doctor gave me a diagnosis like Brian Daboll just gave, I would not believe it. Come on.
Quick healing? You don't believe in quick healing? So you both
I
say
believe
this
in blue
is
healers.
because he needs that strategic. What are they going to think? Oh, we don't know who to tackle. They don't have a running back? No. We'll move on. Showdown 2. Kyle Schwarber last night. Look at this home run. 483 feet, his 45th home run of the year, which matches the number of singles he has on the season, also 45. He's batting 197. He has 99 RBIs. Kevin, what stands out most of those Schwarber numbers?
Maybe that 483, because he's got 2 other 480-foot home runs this year. And you look at that red line, that's 500 feet. Come on.
I agree. That's 550 if it's an inch. Go ahead, Courtney.
Tony, it's the next number. If he has one more RBI, that's 100 on the season to go along with 100 runs, 120 walks, 45 home runs, all while hitting under 200.
Do you know how many players in baseball history have 45 home runs or 100 RBIs while hitting below 200? 0. He would be the first. Courtney Cronin. Wow. FaceTime.
Colts tight end Kylan Granson waited 3 years for his first touchdown in the NFL, and he commemorated it in a very interesting way, a fake newborn photo shoot to celebrate the moment that he scored his first touchdown. I love the creativity. Hats off to this guy. It's awesome.
Oh, Lion King right there. There was a little bit of a Lion King situation as well. All right, we love that. Courtney Cronin, that's back-to-back wins. All right. We're at a 23.5-hour break. We'll see you tomorrow.